The calms hissed with static as the Aether's call drifted closer to the looming silhouette in the void. Jagged spires of blackened alloy stretched like skeletal fingers against the stars, their surfaces crawling with glyphs that pulsed faintly, as if breathing. Lieutenant Kael gripped the console, his knuckles white. Scans show residual energy signatures like nothing we've seen before. Commander Vera's voice cut through the tension, sharp and certain. This isn't just ruins, it's a message. The hum of the alien structure resonated through the hull, vibrating in their bones. Somewhere in the darkness beyond those glyphs, something waited. And it had been waiting for a very long time. The boarding team moved cautiously, their suit lights cutting through the oppressive darkness as the alien metal groaned beneath their weight. Dr. Kael Mirren knelt, brushing gloved fingers over one of the glyphs. Its surface shimmered at the touch, as if recognizing something ancient buried in his DNA. The wall ahead dissolved without a sound, peeling back like living tissue to reveal a corridor that twisted upward at impossible angles. Rina Sol's breath crackled over the calms. That's not just advanced tech, it's like the structure wants us to see this. The air hummed with a subsonic frequency, vibrating through their bones, as if the very walls were whispering in a language just beyond comprehension. Kael's pulse throbbed in his temples. Every instinct screamed this was a threshold, not just into deeper ruins, but into something far older. The team exchanged silent glances before stepping forward. Behind them, the corridor sealed shut with a wet, organic sigh, leaving no trace they'd ever been there at all. The vast chamber swallowed them whole, its ceiling lost in the darkness far above. Holographic records flickered in the air like half-remembered dream cities of towering crystal, rivers of liquid light, and faces carved from stardust. The images shifted with each step as though the chamber itself was remembering. Kael reached out and a fragment of text snapped into focus before him, its symbols twisting like living things. His translator sputtered, struggling to pass the alien syntax into something human minds could grasp. Then, like a whisper in the static, the words coalesced. We built monuments to outlast time, but time consumed us anyway. Rina's hand shot out, gripping his arm. That's not just poetry, it's an epitaph. Around them, the holograms pulsed faster, showing landscapes withering, skies darkening, great ships dissolving into dust. Vera's voice was tight. This isn't an archive, it's a eulogy. The air grew thick, pressing against their suits as if the chamber itself was holding its breath. Then the light changed, the holograms froze, then rewound faster until they collapsed into a single point of searing brightness at the room's center. Something moved there, a shadow against the light, too fluid to be machine, too deliberate to be debris. Kael's breath fogged his visor. The warning in the text wasn't about the past. It was about whatever stood before them now, watching with ancient, patient eyes. The chamber's walls shuddered, the glyphs flaring crimson. Whatever slept here had woken, and it remembered the taste of time. A searing bolt of energy flashed through the corridor, sealing the exit with a sound like cracking ice. The walls rippled, alloy flowing like liquid before reforming into jagged new passages, twisting into impossible geometries. Rina's wrist display flickered, then died with a pathetic chirp. She slammed a fist against it, her voice tight. It's not just adapting, it's learning. Our tech, our movements, like we're data points in an experiment. The air thickened, humming with an almost electric charge, pressing against their suits like a living thing. Then footsteps, distant, rhythmic, each impact landing with mechanical precision, too measured, too perfect to be anything born of flesh. Kael spun, his rifle's targeting beam cutting a shaky line through the shifting darkness. "Show yourselves," the demand echoed down the maze, swallowed by the groaning metal. No reply came, only silence, then another footfall, closer this time. And another, not from one direction but several, as if the structure itself had conjured hunters from the shadows. Commander Vera backed against the team, her voice low. "Formation Delta, weapons hot." The words were steady, but Kael caught the flicker in her eyes, not fear, but recognition. This wasn't just a trap, it was a test. The walls shuddered again, revealing a narrow passage that hadn't existed moments before. Rina's breath hitched. "It's hurting us." The corridor beyond sloped downward, its floor studded with those same pulsing glyphs, now glowing a sickly amber. The footsteps quickened. Something in their pattern sent a primal chill down Kael's spine, not pursuit but orchestration. The maze wasn't just alive. It was watching, waiting to see what they'd do next. Vera's jaw tightened. "Move and don't look back." As they plunged deeper, the air changed. The hum sharpened into a sound almost like voices, layered and distorted, as if the walls were whispering in 1,000 tongues at once. Kael's translator spat out fractured phrases: threshold, inheritors, judgment. Behind them, the footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Then from the darkness ahead, a new sound, a slow, wet scrape of metal on metal. Something was coming, and this time it wasn't hiding. The air itself seemed to fracture as the entity materialized, neither solid nor shadow, but something in between, its form flickering like a corrupted transmission. It hovered just beyond the team's trembling rifle lights, its surface reflecting no light, absorbing it instead. The voice that spilled from it was a chorus, a cacophony of whispers layered over one another, some human, some anything but. Rina stumbled back, her boots skidding against the glyph-etched floor as the words tore through their helmets without the need for comms. "Tolly's on." The name hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Kael froze. The word resonated in his skull, a key turning in a lock he hadn't known existed. The entity pulsed, its edges unraveling momentarily before reforming. "Why have you returned?" The question wasn't hostile. It was worse, disappointed, as if their presence was a wound reopened. Vera's fingers tightened around her sidearm, but her voice was calm, measured. "We didn't come here by choice. This place called to us." The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. Then, a sound like glass shattering under pressure. The entity's form rippled, and for a single, horrifying second, Kael saw faces in the distortion, hundreds of them, twisted in silent screams, their features stretched across epochs of decay. Rina's breath came in short bursts over the comms. Those weren't echoes, they were people. The entity convulsed, its voice splintering further. "You wear their bones. Breathe their air, yet you remember nothing." A shudder ran through the deck beneath them, the glyphs flaring a violent crimson. Then, like smoke in a sudden wind, the entity dissolved, leaving only a lingering scent of ozone and something metallic, coppery. "Blood, old blood." Kael's hands shook. "Tolly's on." The name clung to him, whispered from a past that couldn't possibly be his. Vera's grip on his shoulder was the only thing grounding him. Whatever that thing was, it knew you, not just your face, your name. Rina's visor reflected the dying glow of the glyphs, or the name of whoever it thought you were. The walls around them groaned, the corridor ahead splitting open like a wound, revealing a new path, narrow, claustrophobic, lined with what looked like teeth. Not metaphorically, actual jagged shards of blackened alloy, each one etched with the same symbols that now throbbed in time with Kael's pulse. The choice was obvious. They couldn't stay here, but as they stepped forward, the darkness ahead seemed to breathe in, as if the station itself was waiting to swallow them whole. And this time, Kael wasn't sure he wanted to resist. Rina's fingers trembled as she pressed them against the chamber wall. The alloy wasn't cold, but alive, pulsing with a warmth that matched her own heartbeat. The glyphs beneath her gloves shifted like mercury, rearranging into new patterns that mirrored the veins in her wrist. "It's not just showing us memories," she whispered. "It's sharing them." The realization hit her like a static shock. Every groove in the metal, every flickering hologram wasn't mere recording. It was an invitation. A transfusion. Kael staggered back as the same symbols etching the walls began searing into his skin, luminous lines crawling up his forearms. He clutched his head as the visions detonated behind his eyes, cities of glass collapsing into seas of fire, a sky choked with dying ships, and everywhere the screaming. Not just sound, but the raw terror of billions imprinted into the very atoms of this place. "Get it out of me." His voice cracked as he clawed at his arms, but the glyphs only burned brighter, fusing deeper. Rina reached for him, but the moment her hand made contact, the floodgates burst open. The archive didn't discriminate, it poured into them both. She saw herself through Kael's eyes, then through stranger eyes, through hundreds of lives that weren't hers but somehow were. A name tore from her lips, Tolly's on. And the chamber answered, walls peeling back to reveal a cavernous core where thousands of hollowed-out suits hung suspended, their visors dark. Not armor, coffins. The archive's voice vibrated through their bones, no longer words but raw meaning. Preservation requires sacrifice. Kael's knees hit the deck as the visions rewrote his nerves, his muscles remembering motions he'd never learned, fingers curling around weapons that hadn't existed in millennia. Rina fought to focus, clinging to one awful truth in the maelstrom. The archive wasn't just showing them history, it was making them relive it, every death, every failure, and somewhere in the storm of collapsing memories, the original architects whispered the cruelest revelation of all. They hadn't built this place to preserve their legacy. They'd built it to find worthy replacements. Commander Vera's voice sliced through the chaos like a blade. "Fall back to the ship, now." The team didn't hesitate, their boots pounding against the shifting alloy as the corridor behind them contorted, walls sealing shut with a wet, organic finality. Kael's breath came in ragged bursts, the glyphs on his arms still burning with stolen memories, his mind reeling from the weight of what they'd uncovered. The archive wasn't just a tomb, it was a beacon, and they'd just lit the fuse. Static erupted in their helmets as the Aether's call broke through the interference. The pilot's voice was strained, fingers dancing across the console in a desperate attempt to lock onto their signals. "Commander, we've got a problem." The structure, it's emitting a pulse, some kind of directed transmission. Vera's blood ran cold. Destination, the pause was a heartbeat too long. Trajectory matches Sol's system. Earth, Rina's hands flew over her wrist display, passing the fragmented data streaming in. It's not just a signal, it's a homing pattern, like it's stitching coordinates into the fabric of space itself. The implications settled over them like a suffocating weight. They hadn't just awakened an archive, they'd tripped an alarm, and something out there, something older and hungrier than the ruins around them, was now listening. Kael wrenched open a panel in the corridor, exposing a nest of pulsating tendrils that passed for circuitry. "If we can disrupt the transmission here, maybe we buy ourselves time." His voice was steady, but his hands shook not from fear, but from the ghost of instincts that weren't his own. The glyphs on his skin flared as his fingers brushed the alien tech, and for a fleeting second he understood. The structure wasn't just signaling, it was calling home. Vera made the call. "Rina, get to the ship. Prep the engines for an emergency jump. Kael, you're with me. We sever this signal at the source." The corridor trembled, the walls shuddering as if the structure itself resisted their defiance. As they sprinted toward the pulsing core of the archive, the air thickened with a new sound, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through their bones. The pilot's warning crackled through the comms, urgency laced with dread. "Commander, whatever you just did, it's not just broadcasting anymore, it's echoing." And the echo isn't empty. Far beyond the ruined spires of the archive, in the lightless gulfs between stars, something vast and patient stirred. It had been waiting. It had been listening, and now, with the signal arcing toward Earth like a flare in the dark, it began to move. The entity's form shuddered, its edges fraying like smoke in a gale before solidifying into something almost humanoid, a silhouette of stretched limbs and hollow eyes. Kael's breath caught as the air around them warped, the chamber dissolving into a sprawling city of impossible geometry, towers of mirrored glass reflecting twin suns. The vision was so vivid he could taste the metallic tang of the air, feel the hum of energy coursing through the streets beneath his boots. The entity's voice slithered into his mind, not through sound but as a pressure behind his teeth. Watch the sky split, not with light but with absence, a yawning maw of pure void where the stars should have been. The city's inhabitants recoiled, their forms flickering between solid and spectral as the anomaly pulsed, a grotesque heartbeat tearing at the fabric of everything. Kael's stomach lurched as he understood. This wasn't an attack, it was an experiment. The ancients had reached too far, clawed at something they thought they could control. The entity's whisper was a blade of ice down his spine. You see it now, the flaw in the design. Figures in shimmering robes gathered around a machine of spiraling light, their hands moving in frantic unison. Not to stop the rupture, to widen it, to peer inside. The entity's laughter was the sound of breaking glass. They called it enlightenment. It was entropy. The void surged outward, swallowing the nearest tower's whole, their reflections shattering into a million fragments that rained upward into the darkness. Then silence. The vision snapped back to the present, the chamber walls weeping black fluid where the glyphs had been. Kael's knees hit the deck, his vision swimming with afterimages of collapsing worlds. The entity loomed closer, its form vibrating with something almost like pity. Your blood sings with their arrogance, their desperation. A tendril of shadow brushed his wrist, and his veins ignited with fresh pain as the glyphs on his arms rearranged into a single, pulsing sigil. Rina lunged forward, her rifle's muzzle glowing blue with overload charge. Get away from him. The entity didn't flinch. It tilted its head, the motion too fluid, too wrong. You pull the trigger, but do you know whose finger moves yours? The word struck deeper than any weapon. Kael's hand spasmed, not his own movement, but a memory of motion, a reflex imprinted in his cells from lives he'd never lived. Vera's voice cut through the paralysis. Genetic memory, that's what it's showing us. Their code is in our DNA. The entity's form rippled in approval. The echo becomes the voice, the inheritors become the architects, the chamber lights dimmed, the walls contracting like a living lung. Shadows pooled at their feet, thickening into shapes. Figures with Kael's face, Rina's eyes, Vera's stance, but stretched across centuries, their features worn thin by time. The realization was a cold hand around Kael's throat. They weren't just seeing the past, they were staring at their own futures. The entity's final whisper slithered through the dark, filling the space between heartbeats. Run, little echoes, before the void remembers your name. Rina's fingers flew across the surface of the alien console, her makeshift device sparking as she forced incompatible technologies to communicate. Almost there, she muttered through gritted teeth, watching the holographic display flicker with each adjustment. The structure seemed to recoil from her touch, the walls contracting like irritated muscle tissue as she rerouted power through exposed neural filaments. A low, guttural vibration pulsed through the deck, not a sound, but a sensation like the entire station was growling in protest. Then, without warning, the floor beneath her liquefied. Rina gasped as her boots sank into suddenly molten alloy, the metal creeping up her calves with terrifying sentience. "It's fighting back," she shouted, wrenching one leg free with a wet, metallic tear. Before she could react further, the walls behind her surged forward, slamming together to form a seamless prison. The chamber lights dimmed to an ominous crimson as viscous silver fluid began seeping from the ceiling in thick, glistening strands. Kael pounded against the barrier, his fists leaving no mark on the living metal. Rina, the liquid pooled around her ankles now, rising with alarming speed. Through the translucent wall, he could see her frantically working the device even as the fluid reached her knees, her movements growing sluggish as it clung to her suit like quicksand. The entity materialized beside him, its form vibrating with what might have been amusement. She alters the design alters her in turn. Desperation clawed at Kael's throat. He turned to the entity, the glyphs on his arms flaring as he stepped forward. "You want memories, take mine." His voice didn't waver. Every vision, every stolen moment, just let her go. The air between them thickened, charged with something ancient and unfathomable. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the entity's shadowy tendrils extended, brushing his temples with feather-light precision. Agony erupted behind Kael's eyes, not pain, but extraction, as if his very essence was being unspooled. The chamber walls convulsed, the liquid metal recoiling from Rina as though repelled by an unseen force. She collapsed forward, coughing up silvery filaments that dissolved into mist before hitting the floor. The barrier before Kael rippled, then dissolved, releasing her into his arms just as the entity's form collapsed inward on itself with a sound like shattering crystal. Rina's breath came in ragged bursts, her fingers clutching his sleeve. "What did you—" The words died as she saw his face, his eyes, the way they flickered with borrowed knowledge, with the weight of something not entirely human. Beyond them, the structure's pulse quickened, walls contracting in rhythmic waves like a heart pushing blood through dying veins. The entity was gone. But its bargain remained. The deck shuddered beneath them as the Aether's call strained against the structure's gravitational pull, alarms wailing through the ship like distant screams. Vera's fingers hovered over the detonation sequence, the countdown frozen at 30 seconds. Her reflection in the cracked viewscreen showed hollow eyes that had seen too much. "We don't get to choose for everyone," she said, voice raw. "Just for us." Kael pressed his palm against the archive's pulsating interface, the glyphs on his skin flaring in sympathetic agony. The visions came faster now, not fragments but a torrent. He saw Earth cities drowning in the same liquid fire that had consumed the ancients, heard the same desperate cries echoing across millennia. The entity's presence coiled around his thoughts, its voice slithering between synapses, patterns repeat. Only the names change. Rina's console sparked as she forced another system override, her jaw tight. "It's not a test of worth, it's a trap." She gestured to the holographic projection swirling above them, a fractal map of human history superimposed over the civilization that had built this place. The overlaps were exact, wars, collapses, even the same flawed equations scrawled in different languages. They knew we'd fail, they wanted us to. The entity materialized between them, its form fraying at the edges like burning parchment. "You misunderstand," it whispered. "Failure is the lesson." The walls around them dissolved, replaced by a vision of the archive's true function, not a library, but a chrysalis. Thousands of suspended figures flickered in and out of existence inside crystalline pods, their features blurring, rearranging, hybrids, upgrades, the next iteration. Kael recoiled as one pod resolved into his own face, eyes open and staring with unsettling recognition. "We're not inheritors," he breathed. "We're raw material." The deck lurched violently, throwing them against the shuddering bulkheads. The countdown resumed with a shrill beep. 15 seconds. The entity's form stretched thin, vibrating with urgency. Choose perish with them or evolve beyond this fragile cycle. Vera's hand found the detonator. Rina's fingers hovered over the jump coordinates. Kael's glyphs burned white-hot, carving fresh sigils into his flesh, a language of endings written in light. Outside, the void between stars rippled. Something vast shifted in the dark, not chasing the signal anymore, answering it. Vera's hand twitched toward her sidearm, her voice cutting through the thrum of the dying engines. "We're leaving, all of us," but Kael didn't move. The glyphs snaking up his forearms pulsed in time with the archive's failing heartbeat, their light seeping through his sleeves like bioluminescent veins. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of 1,000 stolen memories. "We can't outrun what's already inside us." The deck beneath them shimmered, its surface turning liquid as the entity loomed closer, its form trembling with something akin to reverence. Rina grabbed Kael's wrist, her fingers brushing the glowing sigils, and flinched back as a fresh surge of visions tore through her. The contact lasted less than a second, but it was enough. She saw them, not just the dead civilization, but the echoes that came after, faces with Kael's eyes, hands with Rina's scars, repeating the same mistakes across millennia. "You're not just carrying their memories," she whispered. "You're carrying their unfinished work." The entity's voice slithered between them, thick with grim approval. "The vessel must be willing." Kael didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, not toward the entity, but into the dissolving floor. The metal parted like water, swallowing him whole as the glyphs on his arms flared blinding white. Vera lunged, her fingers grasping only air as the archive's core opened beneath him, a yawning throat of writhing light and shuddering shadows. For one suspended moment, Kael hung suspended in the void between collapse and revelation. Then the entity's final words chased him down into the dark. "Remember with purpose." The light swallowed him, and the archive exhaled, its walls contracting, its spine of blackened alloy arching like a beast in its death throes. Above, the Aether's core groaned under sudden gravitational shear, its hull protesting as the structure began its final transformation. Rina's console spat warnings, the ship's systems screaming in dissonant harmony with the dying archive. But her eyes stayed locked on the spot where Kael had vanished, her voice barely audible over the chaos. "He's not just remembering, he's rewriting." The deck trembled as something vast and hungry stirred in the depths below, not the entity, not even the archive, but whatever they'd accidentally woken by tearing open its tomb. Vera's fingers found the thruster controls, her face set in grim resolve. "Then we'd better be ready for what comes back." The engines roared to life as the archive's spine shattered behind them, its fragments twisting into a new configuration, a doorway, a beacon, a farewell. And deep in the dark, something remembered how to hunt. Kael's vision splintered into a kaleidoscope of fractured timelines, cities rising and crumbling in the same breath, languages dissolving into static, faces melting like wax under the weight of too many lifetimes. The archive's voice was a chorus of screams now, each memory a hook in his psyche, dragging him deeper into the undertow of collective collapse. Yet through the cacophony, one sound remained sharp, Rina shouting his name, her voice fraying at the edges with terror. He clung to it like an anchor, the only real thing in the unraveling storm. Beyond the dissolving chamber, the crew staggered as the corridor walls convulsed, black tendrils erupting from the alloy like ruptured veins. Commander Vera's grip on Rina's arm was iron. "He's gone." The words were a blade to the ribs, but the deck bucking beneath them left no room for argument. The structure groaned, its architecture folding inward like origami in reverse, bulkheads twisting into spirals that defied physics. Somewhere in the collapsing nexus, Kael's silhouette flickered, half swallowed by the pulsating core, his outstretched hand wreathed in luminous glyphs. Rina wrenched against Vera's hold. "We can't leave him to that." A shudder ran through the station as the entity's voice vibrated through the walls, its tone shifting from taunting to urgent. "The vessel is ready, the cycle completes." The air itself seemed to thicken, pressing against their suits with deliberate force. Then the screaming started, not from the crew, not even from Kael, but from the walls themselves, a chorus of tormented frequencies that spiked their helmet displays into redlined overload. Vera's training warred with the horror coiling in her gut. Every instinct screamed to retrieve her officer, but the deck was liquefying beneath their boots, the very metal flowing upward into grotesque new configurations. Survival 1. She hauled Rina backward just as the corridor behind them sealed with a wet, organic crunch, leaving only a smooth obsidian surface where Kael had stood moments before. The last thing they saw was his eyes, no longer human, but flooded with the same searing light as the archive's core before the Aether's call's emergency beam yanked them into the shuddering safety of the airlock. As the ship tore free of the dying structure, Rina's gloves left smears of blackened alloy on the viewport. The archive wasn't collapsing, it was transforming. Spires twisted into perfect geometric shapes, the debris field rearranging itself into a flawless lattice of intersecting light. And at its center, a single pulse flared once, twice before winking out. Not a death knell, a heartbeat. Vera's voice was hollow over the shipwide calm. set course for Sol, full burn. She didn't say what they all knew. The archive had never been the threat. It was the alarm, and whatever slept in the dark between stars was now very, very awake. The silence on the bridge of the Aether's call was thicker than the void outside the viewport. Rina pressed her palms against the cold glass, her breath fogging the surface as the last flickers of light from the collapsing megastructure winked out. The glyphs on her skin pulsed weakly, their glow dimming like dying embers, yet the sensation lingered, a phantom itch beneath her flesh, as if the symbols weren't fading but burrowing deeper. Across the console, the ship's AI chimed, its usually sterile voice laced with something almost like hesitation. "Commander, anomaly detected." The holographic star map flickered to life, projecting a single pulsing coordinate at the edge of known space. A planet, or what was left of one. Vera's fingers hovered over the display, her reflection warped by the distorted data streaming in. Same energy signature. The AI didn't answer immediately. Instead, it zoomed in through layers of interference, through time itself, revealing a ruin. Not of spires and alloy, but of something older. Crumbling stone monoliths jutted from a dead world surface, their surfaces carved with the same glyphs now fading from Rina's arms. The transmission wasn't just identical. It was identical in reverse, as if the signal from the archive had been a distorted echo of this one. Rina's nails bit into her palms. The visions Kael had absorbed surged at the edges of her thoughts, not just memories but warnings. A cycle, a loop. "It's not over," she murmured, but the words tasted wrong, too small. The truth was worse. It had never been over. The archive's voice slithered through her mind, not as sound but as certainty. "You were never the first." Behind them, the void where the megastructure had been shivered. Not empty, not anymore. Something vast and patient stretched its awareness toward the faint, familiar pulse of human technology. The Aether's call shuddered as its engines flared, hurling them toward the new signal, but Rina already knew. They weren't chasing a mystery, they were being herded. And the game had been rigged from the start. The engine hum deepened into a growl as the Aether's call hovered at the precipice of decision, its navigation array flickering between two stark trajectories, Sol or the unknown. Rina's fingers hovered over the coordinates, her knuckles pale where the last traces of Kael's glyphs still throbbed under her skin. The crew's argument ricocheted off the bulkheads, tense and fractured. "Earth needs to know what's out there," insisted Chief Engineer Korvac, his voice raw. "We'd be condemning billions to walk blind into a storm." Rina didn't turn. Her reflection in the darkened viewscreen showed eyes that had seen too much. "Kael didn't sacrifice himself just for a warning," she said quietly. "He gave us a map." The bridge lights dimmed as the AI processed the conflicting orders, its holographic display casting jagged shadows across Vera's face. She stood statue still, her gaze locked on the pulsing signal from the dead world. It wasn't the glyphs that swayed her, it was the pattern. The transmission wasn't a distress call or a beacon. It was a countdown. "We divert," she said at last, the words heavy as stone. But not for answers, for weapons. A murmur ran through the crew. Weapons implied an enemy implied they still had a chance. Rina exhaled sharply as the course correction registered, the ship groaning as it veered starboard. The glyphs on her wrist flared in unison with the alien signal, a searing reminder of the truth they'd uncovered. The archive wasn't a tomb, it was a battleground. And humanity wasn't the next chapter in an ancient cycle. They were the contingency plan. As the jump engines whined to life, the void outside the viewport seemed to ripple, stars stretching into streaks of light. Rina gripped her console, the visions Kael had imprinted upon her surging forward, not just ruins and echoes, but something worse. A silhouette, vast as a planet, turning its gaze toward the scent of fresh sparks in the dark. The last thing she heard before the leap was the whisper, neither human nor machine, vibrating through the ship's bones like a struck chord. "Run faster, little flames. The dark remembers your names." The Aether's call plunged into the rift. behind them the stars did not reappear. The cracked stone bit into Rina's gloves as she traced the familiar glyphs, their edges worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The ruins around them shouldn't have existed, not here, not on this dead world light years from the archive. Yet every fractured pillar, every sunken corridor mirrored the megastructure they'd barely escaped. Vera's boot kicked up dust that glittered oddly in the thin sunlight, revealing more glyphs beneath the surface. Not just older, she muttered, buried. Rina's fingers brushed a half-buried sigil, and the air shimmered. Light erupted from the stone, painting the ruins in holographic blue as a star map snapped into focus above them. Constellations shifted in fast-forward, millennia compressed into seconds until the projection locked onto a single, pulsing point, Sol system, Earth. The blood drained from Rina's face, not just a map, she breathed, a timeline. The projection zoomed inward, showing their planet in startling detail, not as it was now, but as it had been. Pyramids aligned to mimic the ruins around them, Stonehenge's pillars arranged in the same configuration as the archive's core. The ground lurched violently, sending the team sprawling as a deep, resonant hum vibrated through the planet's crust. Dust rained from the crumbling ruins as something beneath their feet awakened, not a machine but a presence. The holograph flickered, recalculating, and the projection changed. Now it showed Earth again, but marked with a countdown, 17 days. Vera's hand found her sidearm as the hum intensified. "We weren't the first visitors," she said, voice tight. "We were the deadline." Above them, the sky darkened unnaturally, stars winking out one by one, as if something vast were passing between this world and the cosmos beyond. Rina's glyphs burned anew, searing a fresh pattern into her wrist, a warning or perhaps an invitation. The ruins weren't just a message from the past. They were a trap laid across time itself, and humanity had just sprung it. The air in the chamber thickened, pressing against their suits like a closing fist. Dust swirled in amber light as the figure emerged, not a hologram, not an echo, but flesh barely holding together. Its skin stretched translucent over bones that seemed too brittle to support movement, yet it stepped forward with eerie precision. The ruins pulsed around it, veins of blue energy threading through the walls and feeding into its spine. "You carry our echo," the voice scraped out, each syllable sounding like stone on stone. Rina's hand flew to her wrist where the glyphs had faded, now prickling back to life. The creature, once a person, once a builder, tilted its head, sockets where eyes should have been fixed on some point beyond them. "We seeded the stars with warnings, not monuments." A skeletal finger rose, pointing to the holographic countdown still hovering above the ruins, 17 days. "You see the pattern but not the purpose." Commander Vera edged forward, sidearm raised but not yet firing. "Then tell us." A sound like dry leaves rattling, laughter, or something worse. The structures were never tombs, they were trials. The walls around them shimmered, revealing glimpses of other places, other ruins on worlds the crew had never seen. Each one bore the same countdown, frozen at different intervals. When the worthy failed, the system reset. We thought this time might be different. The creature's chest shuddered, a sickly glow flaring beneath its ribs. "But your kind still fights the same wars, still bends the same equations toward destruction." Rina's breath caught. The visions Kael had imprinted upon her surged, not just of the ancient collapse, but of Earth's own history repeating it. The same pivotal moments, the same fatal choices. "You wanted us to break the cycle," she whispered. The creature's hand spasmed open, revealing a tiny orb of writhing light. "We wanted you to see it." The orb split, fracturing into thousands of threads that snaked toward the crew. Vera recoiled, but the threads passed through armor like smoke, lodging in their minds with the weight of an entire civilization's hindsight. Not just memories this time, calculations, schematics, the precise moment their ancestors had diverged onto the same doomed path. Rina gasped as the data unfolded behind her eyes, a way to recalibrate Earth's defensive arrays to shield against the approaching storm. But the cost seared her nerves. Activation would require drowning every major city in the same energy that had withered this creature, a trade survival for autonomy. The ruins trembled as the creature collapsed inward, its body dissolving into motes of light. Its final words vibrated through the stones beneath their feet. "You know the price." But knowing has never been your species' weakness. The chamber darkened, leaving only the countdown hovering above them, now ticking downward, 16 days. The orb's light faded, but the choice remained, glowing hotter than any star. The skeleton's warning lingered in the air like acrid smoke as its form crumbled, the last fragments of its substance whispering into the dust at their feet. Rina lunged forward, her gloves scattering the remains, nothing but fine ash and a single, pulsing orb. The device throbbed in her palm, its rhythm matching the glyphs now flaring across her skin with urgent, feverish light. What hunger, she demanded, though the ruins offered no answer. Only echoes. Vera's hand closed over the orb, and the moment her fingers made contact, the chamber groaned. Stone shifted like living tissue, walls rippling as hidden mechanisms stirred beneath millennia of dust. Blue veins of energy lit up across the floor, racing toward a central dais that rose with grating slowness. The orb's hum deepened, vibrating through their bones, and for a heartbeat the ruins breathed. "This isn't just a key," Vera murmured, her voice tight with revelation. "It's a trigger." The glyphs on Rina's arms burned hotter, her vision doubling as fresh knowledge flooded her mind, not images this time, but coordinates. A locus point in the void where the fabric of space itself had been. Nod. The creature's final words took on terrible shape. The hunger wasn't metaphorical. Something had fed on their world, not just its people but its very physics, leaving behind the carcass of a dead star system. And now, after epochs of silence, the ruins around them were transmitting a single, repeating signal. A dinner bell. Rina's stomach lurched as the dais locked into place, revealing a hollow filled with that same liquid darkness they'd seen in the archive. It churned hungrily, reflecting no light, absorbing all. The orb in Vera's hand flared, its glow turning sickly green as the darkness responded, rising in tendrils that quested toward them like a blind thing scenting prey. 17 days wasn't a warning. Rina realized, her throat dry. It's a timer until the table's set. The ruins shuddered in agreement, the walls peeling back to reveal the sky, or what was left of it. Stars winked out in a spreading wave, something vast and patient moving just beyond the edge of perception. The orb's light pulsed faster now, not with fear but with dreadful anticipation. They hadn't found a weapon, they'd found the bait. The ground split with a sound like tearing fabric, the ruins lurching upward as the dormant machinery beneath them roared to life. Blue energy arced between the crumbling pillars, knitting them together into a monstrous archway, not stone now, but something alive, its surface rippling like disturbed water. Static shrieked through Rina's helmet speakers, but beneath the noise, a voice cut through. Familiar, frayed, unmistakable. "Don't look back." Kael's words were stretched thin, warped by whatever space-time fissure had swallowed him whole. Rina whirled toward the maelstrom, her boots skidding on the disintegrating stone. "He's alive in there." The glyphs on her wrists blazed white-hot, their light pulsing in time with the gateway's oscillations. She took a step forward, only for Vera's hand to clamp around her forearm, yanking her backward with brutal force. "Not that way," Vera snarled, her voice raw with something worse than fear, certainty. The commander's grip was iron, her other hand already keying the emergency retrieval sequence into her wrist unit. The Aether's call's engines screamed overhead, its floodlights painting the chaos in stark relief. The archway wasn't just open, it was hungry, its edges curling inward like jaws preparing to snap shut. Rina fought, her fingers clawing at Vera's grip as the static swelled again. Kael's voice fragmented, syllables scattering into the maelstrom. A still me, then a sound like glass shattering. The gateway convulsed, its center distorting into a vortex of spiraling shadows. For one impossible moment, Rina saw him. Not a ghost, not a memory, but Kael himself, his form flickering between solid and spectral, one hand outstretched toward her. His lips moved, two words. Vera's retrieval beam hit them like a hammer, wrenching them skyward just as the gateway collapsed. The last thing Rina saw was the archway sealing with a finality that vibrated through her bones, not a natural closure, but a deliberate one. As if something on the other side had decided they weren't ready. The Aether's call's airlock hissed shut behind them, but the silence inside was worse. The glyphs on Rina's arms dimmed to a dull ache. Vera exhaled, her fingers still locked around Rina's wrist. She didn't offer platitudes, didn't lie. Just met Rina's gaze and spoke the truth like a blade. We go back, but not unprepared. The ship shuddered as it tore free of the dead world's gravity, leaving the ruins and whatever waited beyond them to their ancient, patient vigil. The ship's lights flickered as Rina's fingers danced across the console, the alien orb now fused with the Aether's call's mainframe. Glyphs scrolled across the screen in a sickly green cascade, their patterns resolving into star maps, dozens of them, each marking coordinates that burned into her retinas. Not just one archive, she whispered, her breath fogging the screen. A network. The realization hit like a plasma shock. These weren't tombs or warnings. They were waypoints, a trail of breadcrumbs leading to something far older than the ruins they just escaped. The orb pulsed in its containment cradle, its light strobing faster as it synchronized with the ship's navigation array. Every flicker sent fresh data screaming through the system, charting paths through dead sectors and rogue pulsars. Commander Vera's shadow loomed over the display, her reflection fractured by the scrolling glyphs. They built an interstate system, she muttered, but for what? A proximity alert shattered the silence. The AI's voice was unnervingly calm. Priority transmission intercepted. Earth defense grid signature confirmed. The main viewer lit up with a tactical overlay, 3 heavy cruisers emerging from warp, their hulls bristling with weapon ports. Rina's stomach twisted. They weren't just detecting the signal, they'd been tracking it. Vera's knuckles whitened around the thruster controls. They think we're luring it home. The engines roared to life before she finished speaking, hurling them away from the converging ships. Behind them, the dead world's ruins flared crimson, the orb's signal amplifying into a shriek that tore through every comm channel. Rina watched the alien glyphs scramble into a new configuration, not coordinates now, but a countdown synchronized with Earth's approaching fleet. Wait, she stabbed at the console, isolating the feed. It's not just broadcasting to them. The screen split, showing the same signal arcing in the opposite direction into the void between galaxies, where something vast shifted in the darkness. The orb hadn't been activated by their presence. It had been waiting for this exact moment, for the perfect bait. Vera's curse was lost in the scream of overloading engines as the first torpedoes streaked past their hull. The Aether's call rolled violently, its shields flaring under the assault. Rina clung to the console, her mind racing. Earth's fleet wasn't the threat. They were part of the trap, and the orb in their hold wasn't a key. It was the last piece of the puzzle. The missile alert screamed through the Aether's call's bridge, its shrill tone slicing through the heated argument. Vera's palm slammed against the weapon's console, her fingers hovering over the detonation sequence for the alien orb. One pulse and we fry that beacon before Earth's fleet uses it for target practice. The holographic tactical display showed 3 cruisers closing fast, their missile ports glowing ominously. Rina blocked her path, the glyphs on her arms flaring with each pounding heartbeat. Blow it up and we're no better than the corpses back in those ruins. Her voice didn't shake, even as the ship's AI counted down the missile's approach. They had the same choice: destroy the warning or learn from it. Look where that got them. The orb throbbed in its cradle, casting sickly light across the crew's faces. its pulse syncing with the rhythmic flicker of the star map still scrolling across the main viewer. Dead worlds, failed civilizations, all pointing toward the same gaping darkness. A proximity alarm wailed the missile had locked on. Engineering officer Drevik swore, his hands a blur over the jump controls. "We're out of time, blind jump or fireworks, pick now." The deck shuddered as the first volley grazed their shields, the Aether's call groaning like a wounded beast. Vera's gaze locked onto Rina, the reflection of the incoming warheads flashing in her eyes. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then her fingers curled away from the detonator. "Punch us through, anywhere but here." The engines screamed as Drevik hammered the jump drive, the coordinates unset, the destination unknown. The last thing they saw before the void swallowed them was the missile's nose piercing their shields, then light fractured, space twisted, and the Aether's call tore through the fabric of reality like a bullet through glass. Somewhere in the chaos, the orb's hum deepened, its glow shifting from warning green to something far older, something eager. Static swallowed the bridge as the ship tumbled through uncharted black, the crew's shouts lost in the howl of stressed metal. Rina clutched the console, her vision doubling as the glyphs on her arms burned with fresh sigils, not memories this time, but a message, scrawled in real time by something watching from beyond the jump point. The ship lurched violently, artificial gravity failing for one stomach dropping second before slamming back online. When the view screen flickered to life, the stars outside weren't stars at all. They were eyes, hundreds of them, embedded in a vast, pulsing membrane that stretched across infinity. The Aether's call hadn't escaped the trap, it had been reeled in. The Aether's call shuddered as it tumbled out of the jump, its hull groaning under gravitational forces no ship was meant to endure. The view screen showed nothing but blackness at first, then the distortion resolved into a nightmare. A black hole loomed before them, its event horizon a rippling edge of screaming light, the fabric of space itself twisting like taffy around the impossible dark. The ship's sensors went wild, alarms blaring as the pull of the singularity clawed at them. Then, beneath the static, a voice, Rina's breath caught in her throat. She knew that cadence, that faint rasp at the end of each syllable. Kael, but not as she'd last heard him. His words now came layered with something else, something vast and echoing, as if the void itself had learned to speak through him. "Don't fear the dark," the distortion whispered. "Fear what hides inside it." The pilot's fingers hovered over the emergency thrusters, his voice tight. "It's a trap that signals coming from inside the event horizon. Nothing survives that." Rina didn't turn. Her fingers traced the glyphs on her wrist, now glowing a deep, pulsing crimson. The same hue as the anomaly bleeding through the black hole's accretion disk, a light that defied physics that remembered. "No," she said softly, "it's not a signal. It's a door." The Aether's call's AI spat corrupted data across the screen's readings that made no sense. The black hole's mass fluctuated, its spin reversed. For a single, heart-stopping moment, the event horizon parted, revealing a tunnel of swirling violet light. At its center, a structure floated untouched by the crushing gravity. Not ruins this time, but something whole, something waiting. Commander Vera's hand clamped onto Rina's shoulder. "You can't trust that voice. Whatever's speaking, it's not Kael." Not anymore. Rina's glyphs flared hotter, searing her skin with fresh sigils. The pain was nothing compared to the certainty flooding her mind. She'd seen this before, not in visions, but in the archive's deepest files. A failsafe, a backdoor built into the universe itself. "He's not dead," she said, staring into the abyss. "He's holding it open for us." The ship lurched violently as the black hole's pull intensified, its hunger bending light into screams. The violet tunnel flickered, not collapsing but judging. The choice was brutal in its simplicity. Cross the threshold of a place no human was meant to witness, or let the door slam shut forever, leaving Kael, and whatever answer lay beyond, to the dark. Vera's grip tightened. "Even if you're right, we can't follow. No ship survives that." Rina's fingers closed around the orb in her pocket, its surface now mirror smooth. The answer came not in words, but in the way the black hole's light bent toward it, as if recognizing an old, forgotten key. She didn't smile, didn't hesitate. Then we don't take the ship. Beyond the viewport, the violet tunnel pulsed once, twice, then held steady. An invitation, a challenge, and beneath the static, Kael's voice, clearer now, threaded with something like hope. Hurry. The crew's protests dissolved into silence as Rina stepped toward the airlock, the orb's light painting her face in eerie relief. Some doors, once opened, couldn't be closed. Some choices, once made, couldn't be undone. Behind her, the event horizon breathed in. The Aether's call shuddered as it breached the event horizon, every alarm howling in protest. The crew braced against the crushing weight of gravity, expecting oblivion, but instead, the ship settled into a shuddering equilibrium, caught in a perfect orbit around the yawning dark. Outside the viewport, space itself twisted like liquid, warping around the impossible structure at its heart, the archive, pristine and untouched, its obsidian spires glowing with violet energy. No debris, no decay, as if time had no meaning here. Kael's voice crackled through the comms, clearer now but layered with something otherworldly. Left thruster, 7%. There's a path. The crew obeyed without hesitation, their hands moving over controls as if guided by instinct. The ship glided forward, slipping between tendrils of distorted space-time, each maneuver precise as if the coordinates had been etched into their mind. Then the archive's flank opened, not a door, but a folding, space itself parting like a curtain to reveal a cavernous interior. Inside, the air hummed with a subsonic resonance vibrating through their bones. Rina's breath caught as her boots touched the archive's floor, if it could be called a floor. The surface shifted beneath her, solid one moment, liquid the next, responding to her movements like a living thing. Glyphs flared to life along the walls, their patterns mirroring the sigils still burning on her skin. And there, at the center of it all, stood Kael. Or what was left of him. His body was interlaced with the archive structure, tendrils of shimmering alloy woven through his flesh, his eyes glowing with the same violet light as the spires outside. His lips moved, but the voice that emerged wasn't his alone. It echoed with the weight of countless others, a chorus of dead civilizations whispering through him. They built this place to see beyond the end, he said, the words reverberating through the chamber. But the end isn't what we thought. A holographic projection erupted from the floor, a star map spanning galaxies except the stars weren't burning. They were unraveling, their light stretching into tendrils that spiraled toward a single, ravenous point in the void. The crew watched in horror as entire systems dissolved, not into dust, but into something worse, into absence. Vera's hand flew to her sidearm, her voice tight. What the hell is that, Kael? Or the thing wearing his face turned toward her, his expression a mix of grief and grim resolve. The flaw in the pattern, the reason the archives exist. The projection zoomed in, revealing the truth. The devouring darkness wasn't a force of nature. It was learning, adapting. Every civilization it consumed added to its knowledge, its hunger growing smarter with each feast. Rina stepped forward, the glyphs on her arms pulsing in sync with the archive's rhythm. You're not just showing us the past, she realized. You're showing us our future. Kael's gaze locked onto hers, and for a fleeting moment, the human beneath the archive's influence flickered through. Not just yours, he whispered, everyone's. The projection shifted again, this time to Earth, its cities gleaming, its defenses active, its people unaware. The countdown hovering above it matched the one from the ruins, 16 days. The archive's walls trembled, the glyphs flaring crimson as if in warning. Kael's voice fractured under the strain of whatever force was speaking through him. You need to see it all, and then the vision swallowed them whole. Kael's form flickered like a dying star, the archive's light threading through his veins as his words sank in. The hunger isn't a force, it's an intelligence, he said, voice fraying at the edges. It doesn't just consume civilizations, it studies them, learns from them. Then it uses their own breakthroughs against the next world. The holographic projection above them twisted, showing Earth's greatest achievements: quantum computing, genetic engineering, even the Aether's Call's own warp drives. Each innovation now a glowing target in the dark. That's why the archives were hidden, not to preserve history but to forge weapons from it. Rina's gaze dropped to the orb fused with her palm, its light pulsing in time with the archive's heartbeat. The truth hit her like a solar flare. The glyphs weren't warnings, they were schematics, instructions for something older than war. You built a countermeasure, she breathed. Kael's outline wavered, his human features dissolving momentarily into the archive's swirling data. We built a mirror, a weapon that reflects their own hunger back at them. The walls around them shimmered, revealing thousands of hollowed-out chambers, each one designed to house a living mind, a consciousness capable of wielding the archive's full power. But it needs an anchor, a mind strong enough to hold the pattern without shattering. Commander Vera's grip tightened on her sidearm. You're asking one of us to become part of this place. Permanently, the unspoken horror lingered in the air, not just death but something worse, eternity as a weapon. Rina didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, the glyphs on her skin igniting as the archive systems surged toward her in recognition. Then I'll stay. The words weren't brave, they were inevitable. The visions had shown her why. Every prior civilization had faltered at this moment, refusing the sacrifice. Their ruins were monuments to hesitation. Kael's hand, still almost human, brushed her wrist. The contact sent a shockwave of understanding through her. She'd seen glimpses of this future in the glyphs' whispers. Not an ending, but a metamorphosis. You won't be alone, he murmured. The archive's chorus swelled around them, voices of the long dead woven into its walls. You'll be legion. The floor beneath her feet liquefied, tendrils of living alloy spiraling up her legs. Pain seared her nerves as the fusion began, but beneath it thrummed something stranger, a connection vibrating across light years, tying her to every archive, every ruin, every lost echo that had ever stood against the dark. The chamber dissolved into pure light around her, and Rina realized the terrible, beautiful truth. She wasn't just anchoring a weapon, she was becoming the bait. Vera's hand shot out, gripping Rina's wrist before the tendrils could fully encase her. The alloy filaments hissed in protest, recoiling from the commander's touch like startled serpents. Stand down, Vera ordered, not to Rina, but to the archive itself, her voice ringing with the steel of someone who'd stared into one too many unwinnable battles. The walls pulsed angrily in response, violet light flaring in jagged arcs across the ceiling. Kael's form flickered, his human features surfacing briefly through the archive's glow. There was pain in his eyes, not from the fusion, but from recognition. You can't stop this, he murmured. The pattern requires a sacrifice. Vera bared her teeth in something too fierce to be a smile. Then let's rewrite the damn pattern. She turned to the orb embedded in Rina's palm, her fingers dancing across its surface with deliberate precision. The reaction was immediate. The sigils on Rina's skin flared gold instead of violet, and the archive's chorus of voices stuttered into dissonance. The commander's words came rapid fire, each syllable a hammer strike. The ancients built these places to stand alone. But we don't have to. She tapped her wrist unit, and a holographic star map exploded into the air, not just of known space, but of the dead worlds they'd glimpsed in the visions, each one marked with the faint echo of an archive signal. Every species that ever stumbled onto these ruins left traces in their DNA. The same glyphs, the same nightmares. Her gaze locked onto Kael's. You said it yourself, we're echoes. So let's make some noise. The orb in Rina's hand vibrated violently, its light shifting from warning crimson to something brighter, clearer. Kael's form shuddered as the archive's data streams rerouted, the walls around them displaying not just Earth's countdown but dozens of others. planets with oceans of liquid metal, cities suspended in gas giants, civilizations nothing like humanity, all ticking toward the same devouring dark. Rina gasped as the realization struck. The beacon doesn't just call the hunger, it calls everyone the hunger hasn't found yet. Kael's voice, when it came, was quieter now, not resigned but recalibrating. A warning and a call to arms. The violet light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by something warmer, fiercer. The archives were never meant to be tombs. They were rally points. Vera didn't smile, she didn't need to. Her hands moved over the orb again, and this time the archive didn't resist. The walls around them dissolved into pure light, and for the first time in millennia, the chorus of dead voices wasn't whispering in despair. They were singing. The Aether's call lurched violently as the archive's spire detonated behind them, the shockwave rippling through space-time itself. Vera wrestled with the controls, her knuckles white as the ship's engines screamed against the black hole's grasp. Behind them, the beacon's pulse tore through the void, not as light or sound, but as a distortion in the fabric of reality, amplified by the singularity's hunger into something that could be felt across galaxies. Rina's hands shook as she watched the viewscreen, where pinpricks of violet light flickered to life one by one in the distant dark, not stars, archives. Drevik's voice cracked over the comms, energy signatures matching the ruins, dozens of them, no hundreds. The tactical display lit up like a field of dying embers suddenly stoked to life, each point marking a structure identical to the one they just fled. The scope of it hit Rina like a physical blow. These weren't isolated tombs, they were nodes in a network dormant for millennia, now vibrating in unison as the beacon's signal reached them. Kael's voice, thin and fractured, hissed through the static. It's not just a warning, it's a synchronization. The words sent a chill down Rina's spine. The archives weren't merely listening, they were aligning, their once scattered signals now weaving into a single, coherent pattern. The viewscreen flickered, resolving into a real-time projection of the unfolding resonance, a web of light stretching across the galaxy, each intersection pulsing with the same rhythmic intensity. Vera's gaze locked onto the nearest node, a ruin orbiting a dead star just 3 light-years away. Its spire, identical to the one they destroyed, was now glowing with the same unnatural light. They're not just receiving the signal, she realized, they're rebroadcasting it. The implications crashed over the bridge like a tidal wave. The beacon wasn't meant to call allies. It was stitching together a latticework of echoes, amplifying the signal until it reached whatever lurked in the void between worlds. Rina's fingers traced the glyphs still etched into her forearm, their glow now synchronized with the pulsing nodes on the screen. The pain was gone, replaced by a terrible clarity. They're not listening, she whispered. They're counting down. The display zoomed out, showing the full scope of the network's activation, a wave, front of light surging toward the edge of known space, where something vast and shapeless stirred in response. The Aether's call shuddered as its engines hit critical, the black hole's grip finally loosening. Behind them, the archive's shattered remains collapsed into the event horizon, its final transmission echoing into the dark. But the silence that followed was worse. The crew watched breathless as the last dormant node flared to life, and the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, began to scream. The Aether's call shuddered as it tore through the rift, its hull groaning under the strain of forces no human ship was meant to endure. Behind them, the archive's shattered remains collapsed into the singularity, its final transmission still echoing in their bones, not as sound but as something deeper. A resonance. Rina clutched the armrests of her chair, the glyphs on her skin now dull, their purpose fulfilled. Yet the weight of what they'd done settled over the bridge like gravity itself. They hadn't just activated a beacon, they'd woken something far older than the archives. Static hissed across the comms, sporadic and meaningless until it wasn't. A voice, warped and fractured, cut through the noise, not Kael's, not the archives, something else. The words were barely intelligible, syllables stretched thin across light years of void. They remember you now. The transmission dissolved into silence, leaving only the hum of the ship's engines and the creeping dread of realization. Vera's fingers hovered over the nav console, the star map before them flickering with anomalies, gaps where known systems should have been. Not destroyed, missing, the beacon's signal had reached farther than they'd imagined, and something had answered. Rina exhaled, her breath fogging the cold glass of the viewport as the last stars blurred into streaks of light. The crew didn't speak. There were no words left. The Aether's call hurtled forward, not toward home, but into the vast unknown, carrying the echoes of a dead civilization's gamble, and the terrible certainty that they were no longer the hunters. Somewhere in the dark, the hunger stirred. The credits rolled in silence, the screen fading to black until a final burst of static shattered the quiet. A voice, layered with generations of whispers, rasped a single phrase into the void. "Remember us." Then, only the hum of the beacon's signal remained, pulsing like a heartbeat in the endless night. Waiting, the screen went dark, but the echo lingered.